It's a little bit like the Republican Party always allowed the Southern white population to leave the Democratic Party and come over. But they didn't pander to white supremacy. Mr. Trump did. The hostility to foreigners that you could get from the Republican Party is taken further. Trump defined himself as different. I'm going to give you more than any Republican ever did, and you've got to let me do more than you might. And so people say that in different ways, but that's the deal. Look, the Democratic Party isn't that different. It also supports private enterprise and capitalism, but it makes the alliance based on a different group of people. Women, highly educated people, black and brown people. You know, we all kind of know, if you pay much attention, the Democrats say to the big shots, support us because we will bring in, and they will all, like Nancy Pelosi in that famous moment during the campaigns a few years ago, when she's at a college and a young student stands up and says, to her, what do you think about socialism? They're obviously affected by Bernie and all of that. And she doesn't, you can see the camera's right on her. She doesn't know quite what to say. And she's fumbling, which she's pretty well spoken, so this was unusual. And finally it comes out. She looks kind of befuddled and looks right at the young man and says, we're all capitalists now.
Wow.
And she's right. That's exactly, we're all of them, those folks, and their job is to build the alliance that gets you the votes. And when you don't do it well enough, then the other one. Trump comes along, breaks all of this by saying, I'm going way further in building that alliance, and I'm going to get enough people that I'm going to blow the rest of you out of the water.
Let's talk about that.
For an employer, this is nirvana, because he's not going to have to tax them. Look, he has to deliver that to them. How's he going to do it? He could borrow the money. That's what his predecessors did. But we are now at a level of debt this country has never seen. It's becoming a scary problem, because if the rest of the world no longer lends to the United States government to cover its deficits, what are we going to do? Let's remember that for many, many people, you get paid less if you work for the government than if you go in the private sector. And the compensation for that was job security. What Mr. Trump and Mr. Musk are doing, more than what the workers are that they fire, is they've taken that security away. Where do you think public employees are going to go if either they've lost their job, which is happening to tens of thousands, or they're scared silly that they might lose their job? They're going to go into the private sector. Where else are they going to go? Which means they're going to drive down wages and working conditions in the private sector, because the worker who comes from the private sector, laid off after 5-10 years, that means not only your job is gone, your income is gone, but your career ladder has just been yanked out from under you. So you're desperate, you're worried. You will offer yourself one way or another for less money than the person who's in that private sector job now.
Let me reach over here and put on my red MAGA hat for a second. I'm going to represent the position of Trump, potentially.
Good.
We're cutting taxes for the richest among us. Yes, we're giving more and more benefits to corporations, but that will create jobs. That will allow us to take risks. That will allow us to spark innovation. That will allow us to create the next big market that will allow for, more wealth for everybody. If we build a new internet, if we build a new auto industry, if we build a new thing, everybody gets a job, everybody wins, more money's on the table.
This was a reasonable argument. I don't think it was ever true. I'm a professor of economics. I've studied it all my life. What you're saying is a nice way, better way than they usually do, for what used to be called trickle-down economics. You help the folks at the top, you boost the profits, you give them a tax cut, and it'll trickle down to a good job for me and all that. There was a grain of truth to that, but it isn't anymore. And that's perhaps the most important thing that I can tell you. And I'll say it as bluntly as I know how. The American empire is over. We're done. We peaked about 12, 15 years ago, and we are on a down. And it's very hard for the American people, which I understand. I am one. It's hard to get your head around that. We've had a century of on the way up, which is a lot more fun than on the way down. But it does happen to every empire. We're only the latest. Look at the British, how far they've fallen. We're in that process. So the problem with the trickle down is, yeah, there might be more jobs, but they're going to be created in China. They're going to be created in Brazil. They're going to be created in India. They're not created here. This is a cut based on desperation. We have the greatest level of corporate debt this country has ever seen, off the chart. The greatest level of personal debt, and we have the greatest level of government debt. Our government debt is now trillions of dollars greater than our annual output. That was not the case in the 20th century. It is the case now. What you're seeing is desperation politics. The whole Trump phenomena ought to say to you, wait a minute, these jerky moves that are out of whack, right? In recent days, we have seen the decision of the Trump administration to kiss the war in Ukraine goodbye. We're not doing that no more because we can't afford it. We can't keep funding a war, which, by the way, the West is losing, as anybody who pays attention knows. All of these things are signs of what? Of a country that is in trouble and is turning on its friends because it can to save itself. We're going to take over, we're going to get your energy for nothing. We're going to, make you build the wall, you in Mexico. The genius, in a way, of Mr. Trump is that without understanding it, because clearly he doesn't, he feels in his own way, the way lots of people do, that there's something that necessitates going way beyond what has been done because our need as a society is beginning to show up. Look, let me give you a simple example. The best electric vehicles in the world right now, but by uniform global agreement, are produced by something called the BYD Corporation, which probably most folks have never heard of, which is Chinese. BYD, the initials, BYD. They make the best quality, cheapest electric car and truck. You don't see them anywhere in the United States. Why not? Because Mr. Trump put a 27% tariff on them, and Mr. Biden raised it to 100%. So let me give you an example. If you wanted to buy a $30,000 BYD electric vehicle, which you could do, that's what they charge. That's why it's so good. You would have to pay $30,000 to get the Chinese to ship it here. Then you'd have to give another $30,000, 100% tariff to Uncle Sam, or in this case, Uncle Don, in the way of a tariff. So it would cost you $60,000, which you're not going to do because you can get a less good Tesla or GM or Ford or anybody else at $40,000 to $50,000, which is less than you'd have to pay.
The scenario you just painted will happen, and people will be forced to buy U.S. stuff.
Right.
Which then it creates U.S. jobs, which again stimulates the economy.
All right, let me be the economist, okay? That's good for the Tesla company, which I'm sure is purely coincidental, and GM and Ford and the others. Good. And they'll maybe be able to hold on to some jobs. Good. But now let's follow the bouncing ball, because that's my job as an economist.
Yeah.
Everywhere else in the world, every company in Asia, Africa, Latin America that competes with an American company that has to buy a truck as part of its business will go to China and buy the best truck at the lowest price, $30,000, the best truck. No American company that competes with them will do that. And you know what that means? Those companies will be able to charge a lower price because they have better inputs than the American company, which doesn't. In the long run, that will lose Americans' jobs left and right as they're outcompeted by all the rest of the world that can go and buy, and is buying, BYD trucks. If you go to Europe right now and you go on the auto routes all over Europe, you'll see BYD cars and trucks. America is shooting itself. It may be great politics for Mr. Trump. I'm helping the auto companies and the workers. He'll go to Michigan and give us... Yeah, but what you're doing is diminishing the capability of the United States to hold on at a time when its footprint in the world is shrinking. If you take the United States together with the other G7 countries, that used to be the dominant bloc of the world, right? The United States, let's just enumerate them so everybody knows. Canada, Japan, Germany, France, Italy, Britain. okay? The G7. And I'm going to add up all the GDP, total output of goods and services of all of those 7 countries, U.S. and its major allies. And now I'm going to compare it to the gross added up GDPs of China and its allies, known now as the BRICS. You add up the United States, about 28% of world output. You add up China and the BRICS, it's 35% of the world output. We aren't the wealthiest bloc in the world. We're number 2. And that changes everything. Every country in Asia, Africa, Latin America, trying to figure out who to go to borrow money from, who to go to cut a deal with, who to go to sell your exports, who to go to invest in your railroads. You know where they used to go? Washington, London, Paris, of course. Now they go there.
But they go to India and Brazil.
That's right. They go to Sao Paulo, New Delhi, Beijing, and they ask, can you give us a better deal? And here's the news I got to give you. They get the better deals. And they go that way. And that's not going to stop. And you can rattle your sabers all over you put the 7th Fleet in the South China Sea. Isn't going to change that. You've got to come to terms with that, but we are led by people who don't want to do that because nobody wants to be the politician who has to explain to the people it's over. And we now have to figure out, which we should do and we could do, and we have still lots of resources to manage coming to terms with the changed situation. Yeah, well, the United States is at that point which every empire has had when it's over, when the empire is in decline. It's happened to every other empire. I know we might want to believe that we are the exception, we are the empire that will last forever, but the burden is on the person who believes that, given the historical record. But the important thing is not the lousy leader, which we have. The importance is that on the issue of what we just talked about, coming to terms with China, sitting down, how do we live together on this planet? Unfortunately, Mr. Trump is exactly where Mr. Biden was. There is no difference between them. The pivot to China, which, by the way, was initiated in those words by Mr. Obama as president, has been followed by everybody since. In fact, one of the arguments made by the new defense head, is that we have to free up our resources to confront our real problem. You're going to see that coming from the Trump administration now more and more as they disengage from Ukraine, a lost cause.
But that's not a situation that would be replicated by Biden or Obama, would you say? I mean,
no, Biden wanted to fight the Russians. Trump says, wrong enemy, and you're losing. We don't want to do that. We don't want to send American troops over there because that wouldn't fly at home. So that's a dead end. We can't do that.
Is Trump right?
Absolutely. What's he going to do? Everything the United States has been thrown into that war. Remember at the beginning of the Ukraine war, we weren't going to give them Abrams tanks. We weren't going to give them F-16s. We weren't going to give them HIMARS. We weren't going to give them long-range missiles. Everything that we said, President Biden said, was unturned. We gave them because they were losing. They needed more and more. He wants still more. He wants nuclear. There's no end he's losing his country. About a quarter of it are gone already. The Russians occupy it, and they keep moving westward. It's a losing proposition. It's as if the whole 20th century, when I was growing up, I'm a creature of the 20th century, at least the second half of it, everything was told to us in terms of the Cold War. Capitalism, democracy, over here. Communism, socialism, over there. That was the great struggle. What happened? All gone? What? Now we're talking Russia, China, we're talking countries, which we used to do before the struggle became socialism and communism. So for me, I think all Mr. Trump is doing is saying, okay, we are now in a world of big powers, Russia, China, U.S., Europe, but the Europeans are disunified. They're not doing anything. They're not inventing anything. They're fading out of the story. It's really sad for the Europeans. But we're here, and the Chinese are the big one coming up. Let's remember, America's population is 4.5% of this world. China and the BRICS together is 50-60% of the world. Yeah, it's not close.
You say that Trump is doing what whoever had become president would have had to do sooner or later. This may be the most generous quote toward Donald Trump that you've ever given. Why?
I'm going to assume that Mr. Biden was a rational leader and that Kamala Harris likewise. I'm assuming that. They would have seen that there are three ways things can go in Ukraine. Number one, we can have a nuclear fight with the Russians. I want to remind everyone, because Americans don't like to face this. Most of the world believes, and that's all I can say, therefore I believe it too, that the largest nuclear Armageddon force in the world is the Russians. Bigger than the Chinese and bigger than ours. Number two, a conventional war. That would mean hundreds of thousands of American troops would have to be shipped over there and fight against the Russians. You know, the record historically is not real good. Napoleon invaded Russia, was real sorry. Hitler invaded Russia, was real sorry. Do we really? Mr. Biden always said, no troops on the ground, no boots on the ground. He seemed, and I'm going to give him credit, that's a recipe for a disaster that we'll not be able to control. Okay, but there is no third option other than to walk away. Mr. Trump said, I agree with you, I'm walking away. Mr. Trump did it. Mr. Biden couldn't because he was so deeply in. Look, it took us, most people understand, it took us several years to withdraw from Afghanistan. But we lost in Afghanistan. I know this is hard for Americans. We went to war in Afghanistan against the Taliban. You know who runs the country now? The Taliban. We lost. We went into Vietnam to fight against the North Vietnamese. The country was divided at that time, which was run by the North Vietnamese Communist Party. You know who runs Vietnam now? The Communist Party. We lost. All right, we went into Iraq. We were supposed to do something there, hard knows what, but we lost there. We're gone there too. And we're in the process of losing Ukraine. If you're an empire and you lose against some of the poorest countries on earth, you know what it suggests? Something's wrong. Look, when you came out of World War II in 1945, the United States was absolutely dominant. Most of the second half of the 20th century, where people, watching this program, we all have at least some memory about it. We were the richest country, the most politically powerful. We had all those bases around the world. We had the biggest military. Yes, it go to your head. It does. We were king of the hill. But those things are always temporary. They always have been. When we go to Egypt, we look at the ruins of their empire. When we go to France, we look at the chateaus that are the memory of what they once were. It's not going to happen to us. We're somehow different. It's already happened. We haven't been paying attention because it's so painful to look at. I think I'm the patriot saying to America, to save the good things about the society, let's sit down and work with... Look, China says, I'm not asking anyone to believe it. I'm not sure I believe it. But China says they're in favor of a multinational world. They're not interested in being the next empire. Maybe because they once were an empire some centuries ago, they may understand better than most. It's a short run. It's a heady run, but it's a short run. And maybe they will be willing to sit down. And then the United States has a really good deal because right after China, it's us. We still are rich and powerful as a nation.
Just moving in the wrong direction.
That's right. So maybe the best move is to sit down with the up-and-comers and work something out.